Hello, this is Olga. Today, I am going to tell you a soothing story that will help you fall asleep. So please make yourself comfortable, adjust the volume to a pleasant level, and let's begin. Leaving the shore. Imagine, if you will, the quietest hour of the morning. It is that precise moment before the sun has truly risen, when the world is painted in shades of soft blue and charcoal gray. The air is still. The birds have not yet begun to sing. In a small town in the heart of Ohio, everything is asleep. In a house that looks like every other house on the street, a door handle turns. It moves slowly with a deliberate, gentle motion. There is a soft click, barely louder than a whisper. Leo steps out onto the porch. He is 18 years old. He is tall and lean, wearing a simple flannel shirt and worn-out jeans that have softened with time. On his back, he carries a backpack. It is not heavy. It holds only the essentials: 2 changes of clothes, a thick wool sweater, a notebook, a pencil, and a map of the world that has been folded and unfolded so many times the corners are soft and fuzzy. His pockets are empty. There is no money inside, no jingling coins, no rustling bills, but his heart feels full. For years, the noise inside that house had been too loud. Arguments, slamming doors, the heavy weight of unhappiness. But as Leo closes the front door behind him for the last time, he doesn't feel anger. He feels a release, like a heavy winter coat sliding off his shoulders. The silence of the morning wraps around him like a hug. He walks down the driveway. His boots make a rhythmic sound on the pavement. Step, step, step. It is a steady, reassuring beat. He breathes in the cool, damp air. It smells of dew on the grass and the faint, earthy scent of old oak trees. Leo is walking away from everything he knows and toward everything he has ever dreamed of. He wants to see the world, not just pictures on a screen, but the real world. He wants to touch the ancient stones of castles, feel the humidity of the jungle, and stand in the silence of the desert. He is starting with nothing, trusting that the road will provide. He reaches the edge of town as the sky begins to change. A faint ribbon of peach and gold appears on the horizon. The streetlights flicker and buzz, then go dark. The day has begun. Leo reaches the highway ramp. He stands there, patient and still. He is not in a hurry. Time has slowed down for him. He watches the tall grass on the roadside sway in the gentle morning breeze. Swish, swish. An hour passes, maybe 2, it doesn't matter. Finally, a large semi-truck appears in the distance. It is a silver giant gleaming in the morning light. It slows down with a deep, rumbling sigh of its air brakes. The door opens. The driver is an older man with kind eyes and hands weathered by work. He nods. Leo climbs up. The cabin of the truck is a world of its own. It is warm and smells faintly of coffee and cedar. The engine hums, a low, constant drone that vibrates through the floor, through the seat, and into Leo's bones. It is a white noise, a deep that pushes away all anxious thoughts. Heading east, the driver asks softly. Heading everywhere, Leo replies, but east is a good start. The truck merges back onto the highway. The journey begins. For hours, they drive. Leo watches the American landscape scroll by like a slow-moving painting. Endless fields of corn, green, and gold stretching out to the horizon. Red barns, silos standing like watchtowers. The rhythm of the tires on the asphalt is hypnotic. Thrum, 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 thrum. Leo rests his head against the cool glass of the window. His eyelids feel heavy. The vibration of the truck is like a rocking cradle. He feels safe here, suspended between where he was and where he is going. He sleeps, a dreamless, restorative sleep. When he wakes, the light has changed. It is late afternoon. The flat fields have given way to rolling hills covered in dense green forests. They are crossing Pennsylvania. The mountains here are old and rounded, softened by time. The road curves gently, left and right, like a river of concrete flowing through the trees. Night falls. The driver pulls into a rest stop, bathed in the soft orange glow of sodium lights. "You can sleep in the back," the driver says. "I've got a bunk." Leo accepts with a nod. He lies down in the small, cozy space behind the seats. It is snug like a cocoon. He listens to the sounds of the night outside, the distant hum of other trucks, the chirping of crickets. He feels grounded. He has no money, but he has a bed. He is learning his first lesson. The world is generally a kind place. The next day, they reach the coast. The air changes first. It becomes thicker, heavier, carrying the unmistakable scent of salt and iodine. The sky seems to open up, becoming wider and paler. The driver drops Leo off near the docks of a busy port city in New Jersey. "Good luck, son," he says. Leo stands on the pavement. He can hear it before he sees it. A low, powerful roar, the Atlantic Ocean. He walks toward the sound. He finds a quiet spot on an old wooden pier. The wood is gray and weathered, warm from the sun. Leo sits down at the edge, letting his legs dangle over the water. Below him, the dark water slaps gently against the pilings. Splash, recede, splash, recede. The horizon is a straight, sharp line where the blue of the sea meets the blue of the sky. Somewhere out there is Europe. Somewhere out there is Africa. Leo knows he needs a ship. He walks along the docks, watching the massive cranes lift containers as if they were toys. He sees a large cargo ship, painted a deep, rusty red. Its name is painted on the stern, the Atlas. He approaches the crew. He offers his hands. He offers his work. He doesn't ask for money, only for passage. He tells the captain, a stern man who smells of pipe tobacco, that he will sweep, scrub, peel potatoes, or paint. He just wants to go across. The captain looks at Leo. He sees the determination in the young man's eyes. He sees the empty pockets and the full heart. "We leave at high tide," the captain says. "You can work in the galley." That evening, just as the sun begins to set, setting the clouds on fire with pink and violet light, the ship's engines rumble to life. The sound is deep, a vibration that resonates in Leo's chest. The massive ropes are cast off. Leo stands on the rear deck. He watches the land slowly drift away. The buildings of the city shrink, turning into silhouettes, then into tiny twinkling lights, and finally, they disappear into the gathering darkness. Now there is only the ocean. The ship settles into a rhythm. It is a slow, majestic movement. The bow rises and falls, rises and falls. The ocean is breathing and the ship breathes with it. Leo goes to his small cabin. It is simple. A narrow bunk, a small porthole. He lies down. The rocking motion is stronger here. It is the most soothing feeling he has ever known. It is as if the entire planet is rocking him to sleep. Outside, the waves rush by with a continuous, rushing sound. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. He is floating. He is moving. He is free. With the sound of the Atlantic filling his dreams, Leo closes his eyes. The first step is done. The world is waiting. The Atlantic lullaby. Time behaves differently on the open ocean. On land, time is measured in minutes and hours, in traffic lights and ticking clocks. But here, on the vast expanse of the Atlantic, time is measured in the rising and falling of the sun and the endless rolling of the waves. For Leo, the first few days blur into a singular, peaceful sensation. He wakes up each morning not to an alarm, but to the light filtering through the small, round porthole of his cabin. It is a soft, blue light reflecting the water outside. The first thing he notices every day is the vibration. The ship's engine is a constant, steady heartbeat deep within the steel hull. Thrum, 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 thrum. It never stops. It is a reminder that they are moving, always moving, even when he is still. Leo's routine becomes a meditation. He climbs the narrow metal stairs to the galley, the ship's kitchen. The air there is warm and smells of yeast and strong coffee. The cook, a quiet man named Thomas who moves with slow, deliberate precision, hands him a sack of potatoes. For hours, Leo sits on a small stool peeling potatoes. It might sound like a chore, but to Leo, it is a rhythm. Pick up a potato, peel, scrape, 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 drop it in the water, splash, pick up the next one. His mind clears. There is no anxiety, no rush, just the simple task at hand and the swaying of the floor beneath his feet. The ship rolls gently to the left, pauses, and then rolls back to the right. It is a slow dance, and his body learns to move with it, adjusting his balance without him even thinking about it. After his work is done, Leo goes out onto the deck. This is his favorite time. Midday. The sun is high, a blazing white disk in a sky so blue it looks like painted porcelain. He walks to the railing and looks down. The ship, the Atlas, is cutting through the water with immense power. The bow breaks the surface, creating a wave of white foam that rushes along the side of the ship. The sound is a continuous, rushing hiss. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H whoosh. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H whoosh. There is nothing else to see. No other ships. No land. Just a 360-degree circle of water. It is a desert of blue. The waves are not angry. They are long and rolling, like wrinkles on a giant blanket being shaken in slow motion. Sometimes, Leo spots a flying fish leaping from the water, a flash of silver that disappears as quickly as it arrived. Once, he sees the dark, curved back of a whale breaking the surface hundreds of yards away, a silent greeting from the deep. Evenings are the quietest. As the sun begins to dip toward the western horizon, the direction they came from, the sky turns into a masterpiece of lavender, apricot, and deep indigo. The ocean darkens, turning from blue to black. Leo stands at the stern, watching the white wake of the ship trailing behind them. It looks like a road paved on the water, stretching back toward America before fading into the waves. He realizes he doesn't miss the land. He feels held by the water. Night on the ocean is darker than anything Leo has ever known. There is no light pollution here. When he looks up, the stars are not just scattered points of light. They are a dense, glowing dust spilled across the heavens. He sees the Milky Way, a cloudy river of light. He feels incredibly small, but not lonely. He feels like a part of this vast, silent universe. Weeks pass. The rhythm of the ship becomes his rhythm. Wake, work, watch the sea, sleep. Wake, work, watch the sea, sleep. The salt air settles on his skin. His breathing slows down to match the heave of the ocean. One morning, the air changes. Leo is on the deck, breathing in deeply. The smell is different. It is no longer just salt and water. There is a faint, sweet scent on the wind. It smells of damp earth, pine needles, and rain. The cook, Thomas, stands beside him and points a finger toward the east. Land, he says softly. Europe. At first, Leo sees nothing but the gray mist on the horizon. But as the hours pass, the mist begins to dissolve. A shape emerges. It is dark and jagged. It is the coast of Portugal. They are approaching slowly. The blue water turns to a greenish gray as the seabed rises to meet them. Seagulls appear, wheeling and crying overhead, their white wings catching the light. Caw-caw. It is the first sound of the outside world Leo has heard in weeks. The ship slows down. The engine's hum drops an octave, becoming a deep, vibrating growl. They drift past tall cliffs topped with green grass. Leo sees a lighthouse standing like a white sentinel on a rocky point. He sees small white houses with terracotta roofs clinging to the hillsides. They enter the harbor of a coastal city as the sun is setting. The water in the bay is calm, almost like glass. The ship glides toward the dock. The engines are cut. Silence. For the first time in weeks, the vibration stops. The sudden stillness rings in Leo's ears. He packs his backpack, the same 2 shirts, the same wool sweater, the map. He walks down the gangway. His boots touch the cobblestone pier. He expects the ground to be solid, but as he stands there, he feels a phantom swaying sensation. His body is still out at sea, rocking with the waves. He smiles. It is called sea legs. He thanks the captain and walks away from the port. The air here is cool and damp. It smells of grilled fish and old stone. The streetlights are casting yellow pools of light on the narrow, winding streets. Leo is in the old world. He has crossed an ocean without a penny in his pocket. He touches the rough stone wall of an ancient building. It feels real. It feels grounding. He finds a small park with a wooden bench beneath a large plane tree. He sits down. The leaves rustle above him, a drier sound than the ocean's hiss. He is tired, but it is a good tiredness. He pulls his sweater tight around him. He has no plan for tomorrow. He only knows that the road continues east. Leo closes his eyes, listening to the distant church bells tolling the hour. Bong, bong, bong. He is safe. He is here. And the adventure has only just begun. The stone path. Leo wakes up on the wooden bench just as the city is beginning to stir. The morning air in this part of the world is different from home. It is drier, sharper. It smells of baked bread and salt. He stretches his limbs. The phantom rocking of the ship has faded, replaced by the solid, unmoving certainty of the earth beneath his feet. He stands up, shoulders his backpack, and begins to walk. He does not stay in the city. Cities are loud, and right now, Leo is seeking the quiet rhythm of the road. He navigates through narrow, cobblestone alleys where laundry hangs drying on lines stretched between balconies, fluttering like colorful flags in the breeze. Soon, the buildings give way to the countryside. He is walking through the rural lands of the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal blending into Spain. The road here is not paved with asphalt. It is a path of packed yellow earth and white stones, worn smooth by centuries of travelers before him. Crunch, crunch, crunch. His boots disturb the gravel. Fine dust puffs up with each step, coating his shoes in a layer of pale gold. The sun climbs higher and the heat begins to rise. It is a dry, comfortable heat. It warms his back and loosens his muscles. The landscape is painted in shades of ochre, olive green, and burnt orange. Leo passes endless groves of cork trees. Their trunks are gnarled and thick, their bark peeling away in rough, textured layers. The leaves are small and silvery green, rustling dryly in the gentle wind. SHHH. He walks for hours without seeing a single car. Sometimes he sees a farmer in the distance, working slowly in a vineyard. They exchange a silent wave. No words are needed. There is a mutual respect between those who work the land and those who walk it. Around midday, the sound of the world changes. The birds go quiet, hiding from the heat. In their place, the cicadas begin their song. It is a vibrating, electric hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z. It is the sound of high summer, a hypnotic drone that makes the eyelids feel heavy. Leo finds an old stone wall running alongside the path. It is ancient, covered in patches of dried moss and tiny yellow flowers. He sits in the shade of an olive tree that leans over the wall. He takes a sip of water from a fountain he found earlier in a village square. The water is cool and tastes of clean stone. He closes his eyes for a moment. He listens to the wind moving through the olive branches. It sounds different here than in the maple trees of Ohio. It is a whisper, a soft rustling of dry leaves against each other. He continues walking as the afternoon stretches out. The shadows grow longer, stretching across the dusty path like fingers. The light turns golden, thick like honey. He comes across a small, abandoned stone barn. The roof is gone, but the walls are sturdy. Inside, there is a pile of dry hay left behind from a past harvest. It smells sweet, like dried clover and sunshine. Leo decides this is his home for the night. He doesn't need a hotel. He has the walls to shelter him from the wind and the open sky to watch the stars. He lays out his sweater as a pillow. As twilight fades to night, the temperature drops. The dry earth releases the heat it stored during the day. It is comfortable. The cicadas stop their singing. The silence returns, deep and profound. Leo lies on the hay, looking up. Framed by the stone walls, he sees the first star appear, then another. He is thousands of miles from where he started, but he feels completely at peace. The walking has tired his body in the best possible way. His legs feel heavy and relaxed. His mind is empty of worry. There is only the smell of hay, the cooling air, and the knowledge that tomorrow the path continues. He closes his eyes, and the silence of the old stone barn wraps around him like a blanket. The gray blanket. The transition was slow, almost imperceptible, like the changing of a season captured in a single week of walking. Leo had left the dry, golden dust of the southern plains behind. The heat, which had been a constant companion, a heavy, warm hand pressing on his back, began to lift. The landscape changed its colors. The burnt oranges and pale yellows of the dry earth gave way to deep, vibrant greens. He was entering the foothills of the mountains that separated the peninsula from the rest of the continent. The air here was different. It didn't smell of baked clay and dry pine anymore. It smelled of rich, dark soil, damp moss, and distant snow. Leo walked with his steady, unhurried rhythm. Left foot, right foot. Left foot, right foot. His boots, now coated in a layer of darker mud, made a softer sound on the path. The gravel road had turned into a narrow lane lined with tall, slender poplar trees. They stood like sentinels, swaying gently in a breeze that carried a distinct chill. He looked up at the sky. For weeks, it had been a relentless, piercing blue. But today, the sky was a canvas of soft grays. Clouds were gathering, rolling in from the Atlantic, thick and heavy with moisture. They didn't look threatening. They looked like a soft, woolen blanket being pulled over the world to tuck it in. The light was diffused, casting no hard shadows. Everything, the trees, the road, the stone walls, seemed to have a soft, glowing edge to it. Leo pulled his wool sweater tighter around himself. He felt a deep sense of comfort in this coolness. It was the kind of weather that made you appreciate the warmth of your own skin. Around mid-afternoon, the first drop fell. It hit the dry leaf of an oak tree near the road with a sharp tap. Then another. Tap, tap, plop. Leo stopped and turned his face upward. A drop landed on his cheek, cool and refreshing. The rain didn't burst from the sky in a fury. It began with a gentle hesitation. It was a polite rain. Within minutes, the tapping transformed into a steady, rhythmic drumming. A hush fell over the countryside. The birds stopped singing, retreating into the thick hedges. The only sound left was the sound of falling water. It was a symphony of a million tiny notes. The hiss of rain on the grass, the deeper thrum of rain on the hard-packed earth, the soft patter on Leo's shoulders. He kept walking. He didn't mind getting a little wet. The water darkened his hair and clung to his eyelashes. He felt connected to the landscape, as if the rain was washing away the dust of the miles he had already traveled. The road wound its way through a small valley. To his left, a stream ran clear and cold over smooth gray stones. The rain made the surface of the stream dance, thousands of tiny ripples expanding and intersecting in a mesmerizing pattern. Leo watched the water flow. It was going the same way he was, always moving, always forward with no effort at all. As the afternoon wore on, the rain thickened. The world shrank. The distant mountains disappeared behind a curtain of mist. Leo's world was now just the 10 feet of road in front of him and the gray canopy above. It was intimate, private. He began to look for shelter. Not a hotel, not a house, just a dry corner. In this part of the world, history had left many stone footprints. He passed an old, crumbling wall, then a gate that led to nowhere. Finally, just as the light began to fade into the early twilight of a rainy day, he saw it. It was an old stone washhouse, a lavoir, sitting at the edge of a small, sleeping village. It was a simple structure, 3 sturdy stone walls and a heavy tiled roof held up by thick wooden beams. Inside, there was a rectangular pool of water where 100 years ago, villagers would have washed their linens. Now it was empty and silent. Leo stepped under the roof. The relief was instant. The sound of the rain changed immediately. It went from the soft wetness on his skin to a loud, comforting drumming on the terracotta tiles above. Thrum, 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 thrum. It was a heavy, protective sound. He was dry. He shook the water from his hair and took off his backpack. The air inside the wash house was cool, but dry. The stone floor was clean. He sat down on the wide stone ledge that ran along the wall, leaning his back against the ancient masonry. He watched the rain falling just a few feet away. It created a curtain of water at the entrance of his shelter. He was inside, looking out. There is no feeling more cozy than being warm and dry while watching the world get washed. He took a piece of bread and some cheese he had bought in the last village from his bag. He ate slowly, chewing rhythmically, matching the tempo of the rain. The food tasted simple and good. The village nearby was quiet. Shutters were closed against the weather. Smoke drifted lazily from a few chimneys, smelling of burning oak and lavender, mixing with the damp scent of the rain. It was a smell of home, even though he was thousands of miles away from Ohio. Night arrived, but it wasn't dark. The gray sky reflected the faint lights of the village, creating a soft, silver gloom. Leo prepared his bed on the wide wooden bench that lined the back wall. He rolled up his damp sweater as a pillow. He lay down, curling onto his side. The sound of the rain was now a steady white noise, drowning out every other thought. It was the sound of nature sleeping. It smoothed out the edges of his mind. He watched the water dripping from the edge of the roof. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop was a second of time, falling away, forgotten. He felt the fatigue of the walk settle into his legs, a heavy, warm sensation. He was safe here under the old tiles, protected by the stone walls. The world could rain as much as it wanted. He was untouched. The rhythm of the falling water synchronized with his breathing. Inhale. The rain falls. Exhale. The rain falls. Leo closed his eyes. The imagery of the green hills, the gray mist, and the silver stream played behind his eyelids. He floated on the sound of the storm, drifting deeper and deeper into the comfort of the shelter. The rain was his lullaby, singing a song of ancient Europe, a song that had been sung to travelers for centuries. Sleep came not as a sudden event, but as a slow tide rising, gently lifting him up and carrying him away into the night. The Sapphire Crossing. The rain that had sung Leo to sleep in the old stone wash house eventually faded into a memory. When he opened his eyes the next morning, the world had been scrubbed clean. The sky was no longer a woolen gray blanket. It was a piercing, vibrant blue, the kind of blue that seems to vibrate with energy. The air was crisp, tasting of wet limestone and renewed earth. Leo packed his bag slowly. There was no rush. There never was. He ran his hand along the smooth, cold stone of the wash basin that had sheltered him, a silent gesture of gratitude to the past builders who had unknowingly protected a traveler centuries later. He stepped out into the sunlight. The walk south took days, or perhaps weeks. Time continued to dissolve, losing its edges. Leo moved through the changing landscape like a swimmer moving through water. As he walked further down the map, the green, lush hills of central France began to give way to something more arid, more ancient. The trees changed. The tall, leafy poplars disappeared, replaced by the dark, spiraling shapes of cypress trees that pointed toward the sky like green flames. The air grew warmer, sweeter. He began to smell lavender, vast fields of it drying in the sun, filling the breeze with a calming, herbal scent. He smelled pine resin, sticky and warm. He smelled the dry dust of the roadside. The rhythm of his walking shifted. The ground here was harder, rockier. The limestone cliffs rose up white and blinding against the azure sky. The cicadas returned, their song louder now, a shimmering curtain of sound that seemed to hang in the heated air. Z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z-z. It was a sound that signaled deep summer, a sound that encouraged afternoon naps and slow movements. And then the horizon opened up. Leo crested a high ridge and stopped. Before him lay the Mediterranean Sea. It was not like the Atlantic. The Atlantic had been gray, powerful, and churning with dark energy. The Mediterranean was different. It was a sheet of sapphire glass glittering under the sun. It looked calm, ancient, and incredibly deep. Tiny white sailboats dotted the surface, moving so slowly they appeared motionless, like toys pinned to a blue board. He made his way down toward the coast, the gravity of the descent making his steps lighter. He reached a port city where the land met the water. The harbor was a forest of masts and cranes. The air was thick with the smell of salt, but it was a warm salt mixed with the scents of grilling fish, garlic, and diesel fuel. Leo walked along the promenade. Palm trees lined the street, their fronds rattling dryly in the gentle wind. Click-clack, click-clack. He found his way to the ferry terminal. He needed to cross to the other side, to Africa. He found work for a day loading crates of oranges onto a truck near the docks. The crates were heavy, the wood rough against his palms, but the scent of the citrus was invigorating. In exchange, he earned his ticket, a simple piece of paper that promised a passage across the sea. The ferry was massive, a floating white building. Leo boarded it late in the afternoon. He walked up the metal stairs, his footsteps ringing out on the steel. He found a spot on the open upper deck, near the stern, away from the crowds and the noise of the cafeteria. He sat on a white plastic bench that was warm from the day's sun. The departure was a slow, majestic event. Massive ropes were uncoiled from the bollards on the dock, splashing into the water before being winched up. The ship's horn blasted, a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated in Leo's chest and echoed off the hills of the city. Boom. Then the vibration began. The floor beneath his feet started to hum. It was a constant, low-frequency tremor. The ship pushed away from the concrete wall. The gap of water widened 1 foot, 10 feet, 100 feet. The people on the dock became small figures, waving hands, then just colorful dots. Leo watched Europe recede. The coastline was a beautiful, rugged line of beige and green. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a golden path across the water, a shimmering road of light that led straight to the horizon. The ferry turned its nose south. The crossing would take hours. Leo settled into the rhythm of the journey. The Mediterranean was calm, but the ship still had a gentle, rhythmic sway. It was a slow, lullaby motion. Tilt left, center, tilt right, center. He stared at the wake of the ship. The water churned up by the propellers was a brilliant turquoise, contrasting with the deep indigo of the undisturbed sea. The white foam hissed and bubbled, a continuous white noise that erased all other sounds. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-Hiss. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-Hiss. Leo closed his eyes. The sun was warm on his face, but the wind created by the ship's movement was cool. It was a perfect balance. He felt suspended in a blue void, floating between 2 massive continents. He wasn't in Europe anymore. He wasn't yet in Africa. He was in the in-between, a place of pure transition. He dozed off, lulled by the vibration of the engine and the wind. When he woke, the light had changed completely. It was the blue hour, that magical time after sunset but before total darkness. The sky was a deep, glowing purple. The sea was almost black, and ahead on the horizon, lights were twinkling. Africa. It started as a silhouette, a darker shape against the dark sky. As they drew closer, the shape gained detail. He saw the lights of a city climbing up a hillside. Tangier. The wind shifted. It was sudden. The cool sea breeze died down and a new wind blew from the land to greet them. This wind was different. It was warm, almost hot, even at night. It carried the heat of the desert that lay thousands of miles to the south. It carried new smells, the scent of spices he couldn't name, of wood smoke, of dry earth, of jasmine. It was a rich, heavy scent that filled his lungs and made his heart beat a little slower. The ferry slowed down. The deep rumble of the engines changed pitch, becoming a lower, shuddering growl. The water in the harbor was calm and oily, reflecting the yellow and orange lights of the city. Leo stood up. His legs felt stiff but strong. He shouldered his backpack. The ramp lowered with a mechanical whine and a heavy clang. Leo walked down the ramp. His boots touched the ground. Africa. The ground felt the same as in Ohio, the same as in France. Solid, real, but the atmosphere was entirely new. The sounds of the port were softer here. Men spoke in a language Leo didn't understand, a flowing, melodic tongue with guttural sounds that sounded like water flowing over rocks. He walked out of the port and into the city. The streets were narrow and winding, a labyrinth of white walls and blue doors. It was late, and the city was winding down. The heat radiated from the white walls, releasing the warmth of the day back into the night. He climbed a set of stone stairs that seemed to go up forever. He reached the top of the old Medina, the walled city. He found a small hostel with a flat rooftop terrace. The owner, an old man with a smile that wrinkled the corners of his eyes, gestured for him to go up. "Sleep," the man said simply. "Sleep." Leo climbed onto the roof. It was an open space, tiled with cool, geometric mosaics. There were cushions and rugs scattered around. He lay down on a thick, woven rug. Above him, the sky was immense. The stars here seemed lower, brighter, hanging like lanterns just out of reach. The sounds of the city drifted up to him. The distant murmur of voices, the clinking of tea glasses, a cat meowing somewhere in the alleyway, and beneath it all, the distant sound of the sea he had just crossed, washing against the African shore. The warm wind, the sirocco, brushed over him. It was a dry wind, a wind that whispered of sand dunes and endless horizons. It dried the last of the sea spray from his hair. Leo felt a profound sense of distance. He was so far from where he started, but he didn't feel lost. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The world was unfolding for him, page by page. He lay on his back, his hands behind his head. He watched the moon rising over the minarets of the city. His body sank into the cushions. The gentle heat of the night wrapped him in a soft embrace. Europe was behind him. The vast continent of Africa lay ahead, full of mysteries and silence. But that was for tomorrow. For now, there was only the wind, the stars, and the deep, heavy comfort of rest after a long journey. Leo closed his eyes. The sounds of the African night wove a tapestry of dreams around him, drifting, drifting, drifting into the warm, spicy dark. The golden silence. The morning on the rooftop in Tangier began not with a sound, but with a feeling. The heat of the previous day had vanished, leaving the air cool and crisp, like a fresh sheet. Leo opened his eyes to see the sky turning a pale, washed-out indigo. The city below was still sleeping, a sprawling maze of white geometry waiting for the sun. He drank a glass of tea offered by the hostel owner. It was hot, incredibly sweet, and smelled of fresh mint leaves, a scent that seemed to clear the mind instantly. He thanked the man with a nod and a smile, shouldered his backpack, and walked down the tiled stairs out into the quiet streets. Leo was heading south, away from the sea, away from the blue water and the green hills. He was heading toward the dry heart of the continent. He made his way to the train station. It was a grand, echoing building with high arches that let in shafts of dusty sunlight. The train waiting at the platform was old and heavy, painted a faded orange that matched the soil of the country. It sat on the tracks with a patient, slumbering weight. Leo boarded and found a window seat. The carriage was quiet. A few people dozed in the corners, wrapped in hooded cloaks. The seats were covered in worn, soft velvet that felt warm to the touch. With a heavy lurch and a metallic groan, the train began to move. Clunk, 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 clunk. The station slid away. The white buildings of the city receded. The ocean disappeared behind them. For the next 10 hours, Leo did nothing but watch the world transform. It was a slow, hypnotic metamorphosis. First, they rolled through fertile plains. Green fields, rows of olive trees that looked like silver clouds tethered to the earth, and small streams. Clack, clack, whoosh, clack, clack, whoosh. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails became the heartbeat of the afternoon. It was a steady, monotonous percussion that vibrated through the floor and up into Leo's legs, lulling him into a trance. He watched the telephone wires alongside the track rise and fall, like a gentle wave. As the hours passed, the green began to fade. The earth turned red, a deep, rich rust color. The trees became shorter, scrubbier. They were entering the foothills of the Atlas Mountains. The train slowed as the gradient increased. The engine worked harder, a low, determined hum. They wound their way up through rocky passes. Leo saw snow-capped peaks in the distance, shining white against the hard blue sky, while down below, the valleys were filled with red clay villages. The houses seemed to grow directly out of the mountain, camouflaged against the rock. Leo rested his head against the window glass. It was warm. The sun was strong now. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that cut across the carriage. He felt suspended in time. There was no internet, no phone signal, no news, just the motion, just the mountains. By late afternoon, they had crossed the high passes and begun the descent. The landscape changed again. The red earth turned to yellow and beige. The rocks became sharper. The vegetation disappeared almost entirely. They were approaching the edge of the world, the Sahara. The train reached its final stop in a dusty town on the edge of the wilderness. Leo stepped off. The heat hit him like a physical weight, dry, pure, and intense. It wasn't the humid, sticky heat of the coast. It was a baking heat, clean and sterilizing. He walked out of the station and found a small, battered bus heading to the very end of the road, to a village called Merzauga. The bus ride was bumpy and slow. The road was a single strip of black asphalt cutting through a vast, flat plain of black gravel. And then on the horizon, he saw them. The dunes. They rose up like mountains of gold. They looked soft, sculptured by the wind, towering hundreds of feet into the air. They didn't look like Earth. They looked like a dreamscape. The bus stopped. The road ended here. Beyond this point, there was only sand. Leo got out. The silence was immediate. It was a heavy, thick silence. The kind of silence that absorbs sound. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, no distant traffic. Just the vast, empty sky and the ocean of sand. He walked away from the small cluster of mud brick hotels. He wanted to be in the dunes. He took off his heavy boots and tied them to his backpack. He stepped onto the sand barefoot. It was warm like heated silk. It slipped between his toes, fine and powdery. Leo began to climb the first dune. It was slow work. For every 2 steps up, he slid 1 step back. Step, slide, step, slide, but he didn't mind. The effort felt good. He reached the crest of a high dune just as the sun began to set. The view took his breath away. In every direction, as far as the eye could see, lay wave after wave of golden sand. It was a frozen ocean. The curves of the dunes were sharp and precise, casting long, deep shadows that stretched out like pools of ink. Leo sat down on the ridge. He was the only person in the world. He watched the colors shift. This was the desert's magic trick. As the sun touched the horizon, the sand turned from yellow to deep orange, then to apricot, then to a burning pink. And finally, as the sun slipped below the earth, the dunes turned a soft, bruising purple. The air cooled rapidly. The desert sheds its heat the moment the sun leaves. A gentle breeze picked up, whispering over the sharp edge of the dune. Hiss-ess-ess-ess. It was the sound of sand grains moving, a sound so quiet you had to hold your breath to hear it. Leo didn't set up a tent. He didn't need one. He laid his sleeping bag out directly on the sand in a hollow between two dunes, sheltered from the wind. The ground was firm but yielding, shaping itself to his body. He lay back and looked up. If he thought the stars on the ocean were bright, he was wrong. Here, in the dry, thin air of the desert, the stars were overwhelming. There was no black space left in the sky. It was a solid canopy of light. The Milky Way looked like a cloud of steam rising from a celestial kettle. He could see shooting stars, not just one, but one every minute. Brief scratches of light dying in the atmosphere. It was absolute peace. Leo felt tiny, a speck of dust on a pile of sand in an infinite universe. But instead of fear, he felt a profound connection. He was made of the same atoms as the stars above him and the sand beneath him. He was part of this silence. He listened to his own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. It was the loudest thing for miles. The desert didn't demand anything from him. It didn't ask him to be successful or smart or quick. It just asked him to be. The cold of the night deepened, making his warm, sleeping bag feel like a luxury. The air was incredibly pure, odorless, and clean. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the ancient stillness. His eyelids grew heavy. The visual show of the stars blurred into a soft, glowing haze. The silence pressed against his ears, a soft cotton pressure. There was no past. There was no future. There was only the sand, the stars, and sleep. Leo drifted off, cradled in the golden arms of the Sahara. The roof of the world. The heat of the desert faded like a dream, replaced by a cold so sharp and clean it felt like waking up for the first time. Leo had traveled far. The transition was a blur of airports and highways, days losing their names, until he found himself standing at the foot of the giants. He was in the Himalayas, the roof of the world. The air here was different from anywhere else. It was thin and precious. It held no moisture, no dust, no heavy scents. It smelled only of ice, cold stone, and the faint, woody aroma of burning juniper. Every breath Leo took was a conscious act. Inhale deep, exhale slow. The altitude demanded it. You could not rush here. If you ran, your lungs would burn. The mountains forced you to slow down to match their ancient glacial pace. Leo was walking along a narrow trail carved into the side of a massive valley. Far below, a river roared, a ribbon of turquoise meltwater churning over gray boulders. But up here, on the path, it was quiet. The sound of the river was just a distant, soothing white noise, a backdrop to the silence of the peaks. He was wearing everything he owned. His jeans, his flannel shirt, his thick wool sweater, and a heavy yak wool coat he had bought in a village market. The coat was rough and smelled of the animal, but it was incredibly warm. It trapped his body heat, creating a cozy microclimate against the biting wind. The path wound its way upward. It was lined with stones carved with prayers, intricate symbols that had been chiseled by hand centuries ago. Leo ran his gloved fingers over the rough carvings as he walked. Step, breathe, step, breathe. This was the rhythm of the ascent. It was a walking meditation, one foot in front of the other. The ground was hard, a mixture of frozen earth and granite. Occasionally, he would step aside to let a caravan pass. A line of yaks, shaggy and hulking beasts, plodded slowly down the trail. They moved with a heavy, swaying grace. Around their necks hung brass bells that chimed with every step. Clang, clunk, clang, clunk. The sound was mournful and beautiful, echoing off the canyon walls long after the animals had disappeared around a bend. As the afternoon wore on, the clouds began to descend. They didn't float above the mountains, they moved through them. Leo walked into a cloud. The world turned soft and white. The sharp edges of the cliffs vanished. The path ahead faded into a gray mist. The sound of his own footsteps became muffled, as if he were walking on cotton. He felt wrapped in the mist. It was damp and cold on his cheeks, but invigorating. He was walking through the sky. Eventually, the mist parted, revealing the destination. Perched on a rocky outcrop, clinging to the side of the cliff like a swallow's nest, was a monastery. Its walls were white, its window frames painted a vibrant, auspicious red. Leo climbed the final stone steps. Above him, strung between the monastery and a rock pinnacle, were thousands of prayer flags. Blue, white, red, green, yellow. They snapped and fluttered in the mountain wind. Flap, 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 flap. Locals believed the wind carried the prayers printed on the flags out into the world. Leo stopped and listened to the sound. It was the sound of the wind speaking. He pushed open the heavy wooden door of the monastery. It creaked on ancient iron hinges. He stepped inside. The contrast was immediate. The wind stopped. The cold was replaced by a deep, earthy warmth. The main hall was dim, lit only by hundreds of butter lamps, small bowls of oil with flickering wicks. The light was golden and soft, dancing on the murals painted on the walls. The air inside was thick and sweet, smelling of incense and old parchment. Leo sat down on a cushion in the corner. He was welcome here. Travelers were always welcome. In the center of the hall, a group of monks sat in rows, wearing deep red robes. They began to chant. It wasn't a song. It was a vibration, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. Om, hum. The sound resonated in Leo's chest. It was a frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the bones. It was the sound of absolute focus. The monks beat slowly on large, suspended drums. Boom. Pause, boom. Pause. Leo closed his eyes. The fatigue of the climb, the thin air, the cold wind, it all washed away. The chanting held him. It was a sonic blanket, heavy and warm. He let his breathing sink with the rhythm of the drums. Inhale. Boom. Exhale. Silence. He sat there for hours or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in this high place. When he finally stood up, his legs felt light. The sun had set. He left the main hall and went to the small guest house attached to the monastery. The room was small, with thick stone walls that kept out the freezing night. There was a small wood stove in the corner, crackling softly. Snap, pop. The fire cast dancing orange shadows on the ceiling. Leo unlaced his boots. His feet were tired, aching in a good, honest way. He climbed into the bed. It was piled high with heavy quilts, layer upon layer of cotton and wool. The weight of the blankets was comforting. It pressed him down into the mattress, grounding him. Outside the small square window, the wind howled. It whistled around the corners of the stone building, a wild, lonely sound. Woo-woo, woo-woo, but inside it was warm. The contrast made the warmth feel even sweeter. The wilder the storm outside, the safer he felt inside. Leo lay on his back, staring up into the darkness. He imagined the mountains outside, the giant, silent peaks standing guard in the moonlight. Everest, Lhotse, Makalu. They were sleeping giants covered in eternal snow. He felt lighter than he ever had. Here, at 15,000 feet, the atmosphere was thin. There was less weighing down on him. The problems of the world below, money, politics, time, could not reach this high. They were too heavy to carry up the mountain. Only peace could survive at this altitude. Leo took a deep breath of the cool room air. It refreshed his lungs. He snuggled deeper under the heavy quilts. The heat of the wood stove reached his face. The chanting of the monks still echoed faintly in his memory, a ghost of a sound soothing his mind. Om. The wind sang him a lullaby of ice and stone. The fire sang a lullaby of wood and warmth. Drifting between the two, Leo fell into a deep, high-altitude sleep. A sleep as still and white as the snow on the peaks. The green canopy. The descent from the roof of the world was like walking down a long staircase into a greenhouse. Day by day, the air grew thicker. The biting cold that had nipped at Leo's nose in the mountains softened, then warmed, until it became a heavy, humid embrace. He had left the land of stone and ice and entered the land of water and wood. He was in Southeast Asia now. The exact country didn't matter. Borders here seemed to dissolve into the thick, tangled greenery. It was a world of emerald rice paddies reflecting the sky, of slow-moving rivers the color of milk tea, and of air so rich with moisture you could almost drink it. Leo stood on the bank of a great river, the Mekong perhaps, or one of its many wandering tributaries. The heat was profound. It wasn't the dry, baking heat of the Sahara that crisped the skin. This was a wet, heavy heat. It settled on his shoulders like a warm, damp towel. It slowed everything down. People moved slowly. Dogs slept in the shade of banana trees, too lazy to bark. Even the river seemed to flow in slow motion. He found a boatman, an old man with skin the color of mahogany and a conical hat made of palm leaves. His boat was long and narrow, carved from a single piece of wood, sitting low in the water. Leo stepped in. The boat rocked gently. Dip, sway, dip, sway. They pushed off from the bank. The boatman stood at the stern, working a long oar. He didn't splash. He sliced the oar into the water with a silent, practiced grace. Swish, gurgle, swish, gurgle, they drifted into the main channel. The jungle rose up on both sides, a towering wall of chaotic life. Vines hung down from the trees like curtains, trailing their tips in the water. Giant fern leaves as big as umbrellas unfurled in the shadows. The sounds of the modern world vanished completely. In the jungle, there is no mechanical noise, but it is never silent. The air vibrated with the hum of life. Cicadas here didn't buzz. They trilled, a high-pitched, electric song that rose and fell in waves. Birds called to each other from the high canopy, strange, melodic whoops and whistles that echoed over the water. Leo sat in the center of the boat, trailing his hand in the river. The water was warm, like bathwater. He watched the wake of the boat, small ripples spreading out until they disappeared into the reedy banks. The humidity made him feel pleasantly drowsy. His eyelids felt heavy. The atmosphere was thick, pressing him down into a state of deep relaxation. As the afternoon deepened, the light began to change. The bright, harsh sun was swallowed by clouds. These weren't the wispy clouds of the desert. These were massive, towering, bruised purple thunderheads. They piled up in the sky, heavy with water. The air went still. The birds stopped singing. The trees stopped swaying. The jungle held its breath. Then the rain came. It didn't start with a drizzle. It started with a roar. A wall of water swept across the river, blurring the world into a gray-green smear. CHCHCHCHCHCHCHSHHHHHH. The boatman steered them toward a small cluster of bamboo stilts rising out of the water near the bank. It was a floating village. He guided the boat under the overhang of a thatched roof. Leo climbed up a wooden ladder onto a bamboo platform. It was a small bungalow, built entirely of natural materials. The floor was made of split bamboo slats, with small gaps between them where he could see the dark water flowing underneath. He sat on the floor, sheltered from the storm. The sound of tropical rain is one of the most powerful sleep inducements on Earth. The drops were huge and heavy. They hammered against the thatched roof made of dried palm leaves. Thud, 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 thud. They slapped against the broad, waxy leaves of the banana trees outside. Clatter, clatter, splat. It was a loud, chaotic, yet incredibly rhythmic noise. It drowned out everything else. There was no past, no future, only the overwhelming presence of the water. The air cooled down instantly. The oppressive heat broke, replaced by a fresh, earthy smell, the scent of wet soil, crushed leaves, and ozone. Leo watched the rain fall in sheets off the edge of the roof, creating a waterfall that separated him from the rest of the world. He was safe in his dry bubble. He lay down on a thin mattress on the bamboo floor. There were no walls, only woven screens that could be rolled down. He left them up. He wanted to see the rain. The bungalow swayed slightly in the wind, a barely perceptible movement that mimicked the rocking of a cradle. Below him, through the floorboards, he could hear the river rising, the water lapping against the wooden stilts. Lap, lap, lap. Above him, the rain drummed on the roof. Around him, the jungle drank. He felt heavy. His limbs felt like they were sinking into the floor. The humidity relaxed every muscle, untying every knot of tension in his back and shoulders. Twilight came early because of the storm. The green world turned dark blue, then black. Leo lit a small mosquito coil. The thin spiral of smoke drifted up, carrying a scent of citronella that mixed with the rain. The storm began to settle into a steady endurance pace. It wasn't angry anymore, it was just persistent. The drumming on the roof softened to a steady hum. The frogs began to sing, a deep, resonant croaking from the riverbanks. Ribbit, ribbit, croak. It was a bass line to the treble of the falling rain. Leo closed his eyes. He imagined the water flowing all around the world. The same water that had carried his ship across the Atlantic, the same water that had been snow in the Himalayas, was now falling here in the jungle. It was all connected, and he was just floating in the middle of it. He listened to the bamboo groaning softly in the wind. Creak. His breathing slowed down to match the slow, humid pulse of the tropics. Inhale. Heavy, warm air. Exhale. Letting go. The sound of the rain became a texture, wrapping around him. He felt safe, hidden away in this corner of the green world. Drifting on the river of sleep, Leo let the current take him, deeper and deeper, into the warm, wet night. The infinite blue. The jungle was a world of too much green, too much noise, too much life. Leo loved it, but after weeks of the heavy, humid embrace of the tropics, he found himself craving space. He needed emptiness. And there is no place on Earth emptier or more peaceful than the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Leo stood on a small, cracked airstrip on the edge of an island. Waiting for him was not a jet, but a small, single-engine plane. It was white, weathered by the salt air, looking more like a friendly bird than a machine. He climbed inside. There were only 4 seats. The pilot, a man with skin tanned to the color of old leather and bare feet, gave a thumbs up. The propeller spun to life. Whirr. It wasn't a roar. It was a drone, a steady, monotonous, buzzing hum. The plane lifted off the ground with a gentle hop, rising over the palm trees, over the white beach, and out over the water. For the next 4 hours, Leo existed in a world of blue. He looked out the window. Below him, the ocean was a textured sheet of deep, dark navy. Above him, the sky was a lighter, powder blue. The horizon, that line where the two met, was hazy and indistinct. It felt as though they were flying inside a giant sapphire. The drone of the engine was constant. HMMMMMMMM. It was a white noise that vibrated through the frame of the seat and into Leo's back, massaging away the tension. It was the sound of progress without effort. He didn't have to walk. He didn't have to climb. He just had to float. In the middle of this infinite blue, a shape appeared. It was a ring, a circle of blinding white sand surrounding a pool of turquoise water. An atoll. It looked fragile, a tiny necklace dropped into the deepest ocean on the planet. The plane began its descent. The water below changed colors rapidly, from deep indigo to royal blue, then to teal, and finally to a clear, translucent aquamarine. They landed on a strip of crushed white coral. The wheels kicked up a puff of white dust. The engine cut out. The silence that followed was heavy and instant. The pilot unloaded a small box of supplies and Leo's backpack. "I'll be back in 3 days," the pilot said. Then the plane took off again, buzzing away like a mosquito until it disappeared into the blue. Leo was alone. He stood on the sand. This wasn't the golden sand of California or the red dust of Africa. This was coral sand, pure white, fine as flour and cool to the touch despite the sun. He walked to the edge of the lagoon. The water was perfectly still, protected from the ocean waves by the coral reef miles out. It was warm and clear as glass. He could see small, colorful fish darting around his ankles, unafraid. He walked around the island. It took him 20 minutes to circle the entire world. There were no buildings, no roads, just a grove of coconut palms huddled together in the center, their long, curved trunks leaning into the wind. Leo set up his camp between 2 of these palms. He didn't use a tent. Here, the weather was gentle. He strung up a hammock. A hammock is the perfect bed for the Pacific. It lifts you off the ground, suspending you in the air. As Leo sat in it, the fabric wrapped around him, cocooning him. He lay back. The motion was automatic. The wind pushed the trees moved the hammock. Sway left, sway right, sway left, sway right. It was a pendulum of peace. The afternoon drifted by. Leo did nothing. He watched the crabs scuttle sideways across the sand. He watched the clouds, puffy white cumulus towers, drift lazily across the horizon. They moved so slowly that if you stared at them, they seemed still. You had to look away and look back to see that they had moved. As evening approached, the soundscape of the island changed. Far out at the edge of the lagoon, the tide began to turn. The massive waves of the open Pacific hit the reef wall. But because the reef was far away, the sound wasn't a crash. It was a low, distant rumble. Ruer. It was a continuous, deep thrum, like thunder that never stops. It was a protective sound. It told Leo that the wild ocean was out there, but he was safe in here, in the calm water. Closer to him, the wind picked up. It rustled the dry fronds of the palm trees above his head. CHCHCHSHHHHH. It sounded like dried paper being crumpled softly. It was a dry, raspy whisper that mixed with the deep bass of the distant reef. The sun set in a spectacular display of pastel colors. There was no pollution here to make the colors angry or bright. They were soft. Pale pink, lavender, milky orange. The water of the lagoon reflected the sky perfectly, so for a few minutes, Leo couldn't tell where the water ended and the sky began. He was floating in a sphere of pink light. Night fell. The darkness was absolute but not scary. It was a soft, velvet darkness. Leo lay in his hammock, swinging gently. He looked up. The sky was different here. The constellations he knew from Ohio were gone. In their place was the Southern Cross, shining brightly. The Milky Way was so bright it cast a faint shadow on the white sand. The air was perfect. It wasn't hot, it wasn't cold. It was the exact temperature of his skin. He felt like he was melting into the air. He closed his eyes. The sensory world reduced to three things: the feeling of the hammock rocking him, sway, sway, the sound of the wind in the palms, shhhhh, the deep, rhythmic heartbeat of the ocean hitting the reef. Boom, boom. Leo felt a profound sense of solitude, but it wasn't loneliness. Loneliness is when you want to be with people but can't. Solitude is when you are happy to be with yourself. He was a single dot in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. He was invisible to the rest of the world, and that invisibility felt like a warm blanket. His breathing synced with the waves. The island breathed with him. The tension of travel, the memories of the miles, all of it evaporated into the salt air. He was just a body resting in the breeze, drifting, floating, rocking. Leo let go of the last thread of consciousness and allowed the Pacific night to claim him. The wind at the end of the world. The silence of the Pacific island was a memory now, replaced by a new, more powerful sensation. Leo had touched down in South America and immediately turned south. He was drawn to the bottom of the world, to the tapered tip of the continent where the land breaks apart and falls into the Antarctic Sea. He was in Patagonia. The landscape here was vast on a scale that the mind struggled to comprehend. Leo sat by the window of a large, double-decker bus. It was traveling down Route 40, the legendary highway that cuts through the emptiness of Argentina. The bus was heavy and comfortable, its suspension absorbing the bumps of the road with a gentle, rocking motion. Sway, bounce, sway, bounce. Outside the window, the world was painted in broad, sweeping strokes. To the east, the Pampas' endless flat plains of dry, golden grass stretched out to meet the horizon. The grass rippled in waves, looking more like a tawny ocean than solid ground. To the west, the Andes Mountains rose up like a jagged wall of blue and white stone. They were sharp, violent peaks covered in glaciers that glowed with an eerie, electric blue light. But the defining feature of this land was not the earth. It was the air, the wind. Even inside the heavy bus, Leo could hear it. It was a constant, low-pitched roar pressing against the glass. Woo-woosh. In Patagonia, the wind never stops. It travels thousands of miles across the ocean without hitting a single obstacle until it smashes into the Andes. It is a pure, wild force. It scrubs the sky clean. The clouds here were not fluffy balls. They were sculpted into smooth, saucer-like shapes, polished by the air currents until they looked like white lenses hovering over the mountains. Leo watched the kilometers tick by. 10, 50, 100. The road was a straight gray line drawn with a ruler on the canvas of the steppe. Occasionally, they would pass a herd of guanacos, wild relatives of the llama grazing near the fences. They would lift their heads, watch the bus pass with large, dark eyes, and then return to the grass. There were no towns for hours, just the empty road, the mountains, and the sky. The isolation here was different from the island. On the island, the world felt small and intimate. Here, the world felt enormous. Leo felt like a tiny speck moving across the face of a giant. It was a humbling feeling, one that made his own thoughts and worries seem microscopic. The landscape demanded nothing from him but his awe. As evening approached, the light turned cold and clear. The sun didn't set so much as it slid sideways behind the mountains, casting long, sharp shadows that raced across the plains. The golden grass turned to bronze, then to gray. The mountains turned purple. The bus pulled into a tiny outpost, a scattering of wooden buildings huddled together in a valley for protection against the elements. Leo stepped off. The wind hit him immediately. It wasn't a cold wind that bit. It was a strong, steady pressure. It pushed against his chest, tangled his hair, and filled his ears with a rushing sound. It smelled of ice, dry grass, and sheep wool. It felt incredibly fresh, as if no one else had ever breathed this air before. Leo walked against the wind, leaning forward, fighting the invisible current. He made his way to a small refugio, a wooden cabin with a peaked tin roof. He opened the door and stepped inside. The silence was sudden and startling. The thick log walls cut off the roar of the wind, reducing it to a distant, muffled moaning around the eaves. The interior was warm and smelled of wood smoke. In the center of the main room, a cast-iron wood stove was burning. A fire crackled cheerfully behind the glass door. Snap, hiss, pop. An old woman with a weathered face and a colorful shawl gave him a nod. She poured him a cup of mate, the local herbal tea. He took the warm gourd in his hands. The heat seeped into his palms, thawing his fingers. He sipped the bitter, earthy liquid through the metal straw. It tasted like the land outside, grassy and strong. Leo sat in a worn leather armchair near the fire. He was tired. The long hours of watching the horizon roll by had put him in a trance. He listened to the house. The cabin was alive. The wind buffeted the walls, making the timbers creak softly. Creak. Groan. It was a cozy sound. It reminded him that he was safe. The storm was outside, but he was inside. The contrast made the warmth of the fire feel even more precious. He watched the flames dance. Orange, yellow, blue, they flickered and twisted, mesmerizing him. The fire was the television of the wilderness. Later, he went to his room. It was simple: a wooden bed, a small window, and a pile of heavy blankets. He lay down. The blankets were heavy, made of thick, raw wool. They pressed him down into the mattress. Outside, the wind continued its eternal journey. Woo-woo, HMMMMMM. It whistled through the cracks in the fence outside. It sang in the telephone wires. It was a white noise machine the size of a continent. Leo felt grounded. He was at the end of the world. There was nowhere further south to go. He had reached the edge. He closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he still saw the endless road unspooling, the blue glaciers, the golden grass swaying. The sound of the wind was a giant broom sweeping away the dust of his mind. Swee-yap, woo-wash, everything was clear. Everything was simple. Warmth, shelter, rest. The fire popped softly in the other room. The wind hummed its deep, ancient song. Leo burrowed deeper under the wool blankets. He was safe at the bottom of the world. And in that vast, windy darkness, sleep came like a heavy, comforting stone. The cloud forest. The journey north was a slow shedding of layers. Leo left behind the sharp, crystalline winds of Patagonia and the flat, endless horizons of the Pampas. As he traveled up the spine of the continent, following the great vertebrae of the Andes Mountains, the world began to change its texture. The dry yellows and grays of the south were replaced by a deepening, vibrant green. He was entering the high tropics. Peru, the land of the Incas, the land where the earth tries to touch the sky. Leo found himself at a small, rustic train station in a valley that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The air here was not cold and biting like in the south, nor hot and heavy like in the jungle. It was cool, moist, and incredibly fresh. It smelled of wet stone, crushed mint, and rich, dark soil. The train that arrived was not a modern, sleek machine. It was a beautiful, aging creature of iron and wood, painted a deep, midnight blue. It huffed and sighed as it came to a halt, steam hissing gently from its undercarriage. Hiss, Leo boarded. The interior was lined with polished mahogany and worn velvet seats the color of moss. He sat by a large window. The glass was cool against his forehead. With a lurch and a slow, rhythmic chugging, the train began its ascent. Chug, 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 chug. The rhythm was slow, steady, and hypnotic. It was the heartbeat of the mountain. For hours, they climbed. The train wound its way up the steep slopes in long, lazy switchbacks. Leo watched the valley floor drop away. The river below, a foaming white thread, became smaller and smaller until it was just a silver scratch on the green landscape. As they climbed higher, the vegetation changed. They were entering the cloud forest, the neblina. Here, the plants did not grow on the ground. They seemed to float in the air. Every tree trunk was covered in thick layers of emerald moss. Orchids with delicate purple and white petals clung to the branches, drinking the moisture directly from the air. Ferns as tall as people unrolled their fronds in slow motion. And then the clouds arrived. They didn't come from the sky. They rose from the forest itself. Wisps of white vapor curled around the train, embracing it. The world outside the window softened. The sharp edges of the cliffs disappeared. The sun turned into a diffused, glowing pearl behind a curtain of white silk. The train moved through this white void, a metal island floating in a sea of mist. The sound of the wheels was muffled by the fog, turning the rhythmic clack-clack into a soft, heartbeat-like thumping. Thump-thump, thump-thump. The train stopped at a small station perched on a ridge. Leo stepped off. The silence was absolute. The fog absorbed every sound. He couldn't hear his own footsteps as he walked away from the tracks, onto an ancient stone path. He was walking toward the ruins. The path was paved with gray stones, laid down hundreds of years ago by hands that knew the secrets of the rock. The stones were smooth, slippery with moisture, and fitted together so perfectly that not even a blade of grass could grow between them. Leo walked slowly. In the cloud forest, you do not rush. The air is thin, and the mystery is thick. He reached the ruins of an old Inca citadel. It wasn't crowded. In this weather, with the mist hugging the ground, he was alone. He wandered through the roofless stone houses. The walls were built of massive granite blocks, cut with impossible precision. They radiated a sense of calm, heavy permanence. These stones had seen centuries of rain, centuries of sun, and they were still here, solid and unmoving. Leo ran his hand along a wall. The stone was cold and wet. It felt grounded. He walked into a large, grassy courtyard. The mist swirled around him, moving in slow, lazy currents. Sometimes, a gust of wind would open a hole in the clouds, revealing a terrifyingly steep green peak towering above him, or a sheer drop into the white abyss below. And then, just as quickly, the curtain would close again, wrapping him back in the white cocoon. The sensory experience was overwhelming in its gentleness. Everything was soft. The light was soft. The sound was soft. The ground was soft. He heard the sound of water everywhere. It wasn't a river. It was the sound of the forest dripping. The mist condensed on the leaves of the bromeliads and dripped onto the mossy stones. Drip, plip, drip, plop. It was a random, gentle music. A million tiny drops falling in a chaotic, peaceful rhythm. Leo found a sheltered spot under a stone archway that had survived the centuries intact. He sat on a wooden bench placed there for weary travelers. He pulled his heavy wool poncho, patterned with the stripes of the Andes earth, tighter around his shoulders. The wool smelled of lanolin and smoke. It was warm and scratchy in a comforting way. He watched the fog move. It flowed like water, pouring over the walls, filling the empty doorways, caressing the grass. It was a living, breathing thing. It hid the world from him, and in doing so, it gave him permission to stop looking. He didn't need to see the horizon. He only needed to see the 10 feet in front of him. A llama emerged from the mist, stepping silently on soft hooves. Its coat was thick and wet with dew. It looked at Leo with large, calm brown eyes, chewed slowly on a mouthful of grass, and then vanished back into the white cloud like a ghost. Leo leaned his head back against the ancient stone wall. He closed his eyes. He listened to the silence. It wasn't an empty silence, it was a full silence. It was filled with the presence of the mountains. He felt the mass of the rock beneath him. He was sitting on the spine of the world. The air he breathed was 100% humidity, cool and oxygen-rich. It felt healing. Every inhale brought the moisture into his lungs, soothing the dryness of the travel. Every exhale released a small cloud of his own making. Inhale, cool mist, exhale, warm breath. The day began to darken. The white mist turned to a soft, luminous gray, and then to a deep, bruised blue. Leo knew there was a small lodge just down the path where a fire would be waiting. But for now, he couldn't move. He was too peaceful. He felt weightless, suspended in the clouds. The train ride, the climb, the walking, it all settled in his muscles as a heavy, pleasant fatigue. He imagined the people who had lived here long ago. They had slept in these same clouds, listened to this same dripping water. The continuity of time soothed him. He was just another traveler finding rest in the mist. The sound of the water drops became his mantra. Drip. Sleep is coming. Plip. Let go. Drop. You are safe. The cloud forest wrapped its arms around him. It was a place where the earth met the dream world. The boundaries dissolved. Leo sat there for a long time, just breathing, just existing, while the ancient stones held him up and the white clouds tucked him in. Finally, he stood up, moving slowly like a diver underwater. He walked through the blue twilight toward the warm yellow light of the lodge in the distance. But the peace of the stones stayed with him. Heavy, cool, eternal. The Crystal Cave. The descent from the high Andes was long and gradual. a slow unwinding of the mountain roads until the earth flattened out again. Leo had traveled north, crossing borders that felt more like suggestions than barriers, moving through the vibrant, chaotic heart of Central America until he reached the flat limestone shelf of the Yucatan Peninsula. The world here was blindingly bright. The sun was a fierce, white presence in the sky, baking the earth until it radiated waves of shimmering heat. The air was thick and humid, smelling of heated sap, dry palm fronds, and the sweet, fermenting scent of fallen fruit. Leo was riding an old, rusty bicycle he had rented in a small village. The pedals creaked with a rhythmic, rusty-grown creak. Clank, creak, clank, a sound that marked the slow passing of the afternoon. He rode down a narrow dirt path cut through the dense jungle. On either side, the green wall of vegetation was impenetrable. Vines choked the trees, and broad leaves fan-danced in the heavy air. The jungle was loud with the buzzing of cicadas, a high-pitched, electric vibration that seemed to drill into the heat itself. He was looking for a secret. The locals called them cenotes, sacred wells, portals to the underworld. He saw a small, hand-painted wooden sign pointing off the main track. Leo turned the handlebars, tires crunching over dry twigs and white limestone rocks. The path ended at a small clearing. There was no one there, just a small wooden shack, empty and a hole in the ground. It wasn't just a hole, it was a mouth of the earth, opening up to reveal a dark, cool throat. Rough wooden stairs, slippery with moss, spiraled down into the darkness. Leo leaned his bike against a tree. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. The heat up here was suffocating, a heavy blanket of 95 degrees. He took his towel and began the descent. Step by step, the world changed. With every foot he descended, the temperature dropped. It was a physical sensation, like walking through an invisible curtain. The heavy, sticky heat of the jungle remained up above, unable to follow him down. The air here was cool, crisp, and smelled of wet stone and minerals. It was the smell of the earth's basement, clean, ancient, and still. At the bottom of the stairs, the ground opened up into a massive cavern. It was a cathedral of stone. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like chandeliers made of wax, dripping slowly over thousands of years. But the center of the cavern was the water. Leo stopped and just stared. He had seen the Atlantic Ocean, gray and churning. He had seen the Mediterranean, blue and vast. He had seen the muddy rivers of Asia. But he had never seen water like this. It was perfectly, impossibly clear. It looked less like water and more like liquid glass. It was a deep, mesmerizing turquoise, illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight that pierced through a hole in the cavern roof far above. The beam of light cut through the humid air like a laser, hitting the water and illuminating the depths. It was silent. The buzzing of the cicadas was gone. The wind was gone. The only sound was the echo of the cave. Drip. Pause. Plink. A single drop of water falling from a stalactite into the pool. The sound rang out like a tiny silver bell, echoing off the stone walls. Leo undressed and stepped onto the small wooden platform at the water's edge. He dipped a toe in. The water was cool, refreshing, shocking the heat from his body. He slipped into the water. He didn't make a splash. He just slid in. The feeling was instant relief. The cool water embraced him, washing away the sweat, the dust of the road, the fatigue of the miles. He felt weightless. The water in a cenote is fresh rain water, filtered through limestone for centuries. It felt soft on his skin, silky and pure. Leo swam to the center of the pool, directly into the shaft of sunlight. He floated on his back. He looked up. Through the hole in the ceiling, 60 feet above, he could see a perfect circle of green trees and blue sky. Long tree roots hung down through the opening, dangling like ropes seeking the water. They looked like the hair of the earth reaching down to drink. He closed his eyes and let his ears adjust to the acoustics of the cave. The silence here was heavy, but not oppressive. It was a holding silence. Drip, plop, echo. He took a deep breath. In the cave, his breath sounded loud like the tide. Inhale, exhale. He rolled over and looked down into the water. Because it was so clear, he could see deep down into the abyss. Massive limestone boulders rested on the bottom, looking like sleeping giants. Small black catfish swam slowly among the rocks, casting shadows on the white sand below. It felt like flying. There was no visible difference between the water and the air. He was just suspended in space, held up by the cool liquid. He swam slowly, with lazy strokes, toward the darker corners of the cave where the roof dipped low. The water there was black and mysterious. He touched the wall of the cave. The rock was smooth, polished by water over millions of years. He felt the immense age of the place. This cave had been here before humans walked the earth. It would be here long after. Leo was just a momentary visitor in a timeless sanctuary. He floated back to the center. He stopped moving his arms and legs. He let his body go limp. The water supported him completely. He watched the dust motes dancing in the beam of light above him. They swirled in slow, chaotic patterns, galaxies of dust in a universe of stone. This was the opposite of the windy Patagonia plains. There, the world was rushing, moving, screaming. Here, the world was paused. The water was still. The air was still. The stone was still. It forced his mind to be still. He couldn't worry about the future here. The cave demanded presence. Leo felt a deep drowsiness settle over him. It was the effect of the cool water lowering his body temperature, slowing his heart rate. Thump, thump, thump. He felt clean. Not just physically clean, but spiritually scrubbed. The silence had washed out the noise of the journey. He paddled gently back to the wooden platform. He climbed out, the water streaming off his skin. He lay down on the warm wood of the dock, wrapped in his towel. He didn't leave immediately. He lay there in the semi-darkness, listening. The cave sang its slow, dripping song. Plink, plink, plink. It was a hypnotic metronome. Leo watched the circle of light above fade slightly as a cloud passed over the sun in the world above. The cave dimmed, then brightened again, the earth breathing. He felt safe in the belly of the planet, hidden away. No one knew where he was, and that was a beautiful thing. He closed his eyes, the image of the turquoise water still painted behind his eyelids. He was floating, still floating, drifting in the cool, crystal silence, deeper and deeper into the quiet. The desert night train. Leo had come full circle, in a way. He had started his journey on the leather seat of a truck in Ohio, watching the cornfields blur. Now, nearly a year later, he was moving north again, but the vehicle was bigger, heavy with steel and history, and the landscape was a world away from the green Midwest. He was in the Sonoran Desert, the vast, dry expanse that straddles the border between Mexico and the United States. The air here was thin and hot, vibrating above the tracks. It smelled of sagebrush, dry dust, and the metallic tang of heated iron. Leo stood by the side of a lonely stretch of track, waiting. The sun was beginning its long descent, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible. Burning orange, bruised purple, and a deep, dusty rose. In the distance, a sound began, a low vibration in the soles of his boots. Hum-mum. Then came the whistle, a long, mournful cry that echoed off the distant mesas. Woo-woo-woo. The train appeared around the bend. It was a freight train, a mile long, a snake of steel containers moving slowly through the heat. It slowed down as it approached a switching signal, the brakes screeching with a high-pitched, metallic song. Leo waited for a flatbed car, an open platform with low sides. When the train slowed to a crawl, almost a walk, he tossed his backpack up and hauled himself aboard. He settled into the corner of the flatbed, his back against the cool steel wall. He was safe here, hidden from the wind but open to the sky. The train picked up speed. Clunk, jerk, roll, and then the rhythm began. There is no sound in the world quite like a train on old tracks. It is a percussion instrument played by gravity and momentum. Click-clack, click-clack, whoosh, click-clack, click-clack, whoosh. It was a heavy, industrial lullaby. Leo let his body go limp, surrendering to the movement. The vibration traveled up through the metal floor, shaking his legs, his spine, his shoulders. It was a deep tissue massage for a body that had walked across continents. It shook the dust loose. Leo watched the landscape scroll by. The Sonoran Desert was like an alien planet. Giant saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels, their thick green arms raised to the sky in a frozen wave. They passed by one, silhouette, silhouette, silhouette. The ground was a blur of beige and rust-red gravel. As the sun touched the horizon, the heat broke. It didn't just fade, it vanished, replaced instantly by the chill of the high desert night. Leo reached into his bag and pulled out his wool sweater, the same one he had left home with. It was thinner now, worn at the elbows, smelling of wood smoke from Patagonia and incense from the Himalayas. He pulled it on. It felt like hugging an old friend. The train thundered over a bridge. The sound changed, becoming hollow and echoing. Roar, 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 roar. Below, a dry riverbed lay empty, waiting for the rains that wouldn't come for months. Then back onto the solid earth. Click-clack, click-clack. Twilight deepened into night. The sky turned a deep, velvety indigo. Leo lay down on the floor of the train car. He used his backpack as a pillow. He looked straight up. Because there was no roof, the universe was his ceiling. The stars appeared, sharp and diamond-hard in the cold air. The train was moving north, following the North Star. Leo found it easily, a steady point of light guiding him home. He felt a profound sense of closure. He had seen the oceans. He had seen the jungles. He had seen the ice. And now he was returning to the dust. The world was big, yes, but it was also a circle. The rhythmic rocking of the train was hypnotic. Sway left, sway right, sway left, sway right. It mimicked the motion of the ship in the Atlantic, the motion of the hammock in the Pacific. It was the motion of a mother rocking a child. Leo closed his eyes. The visual world disappeared, leaving only the sound and the feeling. Clack, clack. 1 mile closer. Clack, clack. 1 mile closer. He listened to the wind rushing over the top of the train car. It was a constant, rushing stream of air, like a river in the sky. Occasionally, the whistle would blow again, sounding further away this time, as if it were coming from a dream. Woo-woo-woo. It was a lonely sound, but Leo didn't feel lonely. He felt carried. The train was a giant beast carrying him in its belly, protecting him, taking him where he needed to go. His breathing synced with the wheels. Inhale, click-clack, exhale, click-clack. Thoughts drifted through his mind like smoke. He remembered the taste of the baguette in France, the sound of the prayer flags in Nepal, the touch of the cool water in the Seine. They were all just pictures now, sliding into the vault of his memory. His body felt heavy, pressed into the steel floor by gravity and exhaustion. The border was getting closer. The end of the journey was near, but for tonight there was no arrival. There was only the motion. The train turned a long curve, the wheels singing a high harmony against the rails. Leo drifted deeper. The noise of the train became a wall of sound that blocked out everything else. It was a blanket of noise. He was safe. He was moving. He was going home. And in the open air of the Mexican desert, under a canopy of 1 billion stars, Leo let the rhythm of the rails rock him into a deep, dreamless sleep. Click-clack, 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 on and on into the night. The Redstone Canyon. The train ride ended in a dusty rail yard near the border. Leo stepped off the metal ladder, his boots hitting the gravel with a crunch that sounded familiar. He was back in the United States. There were no fanfare, no fireworks, just the quiet, dry heat of an Arizona morning. The air smelled different here. It was the scent of baked earth, sagebrush, and pinyon pine, a sharp, clean, resinous smell that cleared the sinuses. The light was harsh and bright, casting shadows as black as ink. Leo began to move north. He wasn't hitchhiking now. He was walking. He felt a magnetic pull toward the great plateau that rose in the distance. He walked along the shoulder of a long, straight highway that shimmered in the heat. To his left and right, the desert stretched out, dotted with scrub brush and red rocks that looked like sculptures left behind by giants. By evening, he found himself at the edge of a forest. The ponderosa pines were tall and straight, their bark smelling of vanilla and butterscotch when warmed by the sun. The ground was soft, covered in a thick carpet of pine needles that muffled his footsteps. He walked through the trees until the trees suddenly stopped, and the world fell away. He had reached the rim, the Grand Canyon. It was too big to comprehend. It didn't look real. It looked like a painting that was too large for the canvas. 1 mile deep, 18 miles wide. A wound in the earth that revealed the bone and muscle of the planet. The sun was setting and the show was just beginning. Leo found a flat, smooth rock on the very edge of the precipice. He sat down, letting his legs dangle over the abyss. He was safe. The rock was solid, anchored deep in the crust of the earth. He watched the canyon breathe in the light. The colors were not static, they were alive. At the very top, the limestone cliffs were a creamy white. Below that, bands of soft sandstone glowed a pale apricot. Deeper still, the Redwall limestone burned with a fierce, rusty orange. And at the very bottom in the granite gorge, the shadows were a deep, cooling purple. It was a library of time. Every layer of rock was a page in the history of the world. Leo was sitting on top of millions of years of silence. The wind here was different from the wind in Patagonia. In Patagonia, the wind pushed you. Here, the wind floated. It rose up from the canyon floor, carrying the heat of the day with it. It brushed past Leo's face like a warm hand, gentle and uplifting. Whoosh. He listened. The canyon had a unique acoustic quality. Because it was so vast, it swallowed sound. A raven called out, "Caw, caw!" and the sound drifted away, getting smaller and smaller until it dissolved into the distance. It emphasized the silence rather than breaking it. As the sun sank lower, the shadows in the canyon lengthened. They stretched out like dark fingers reaching across the void. The red rock turned to burgundy. The orange turned to copper. Leo felt incredibly heavy, grounded by the sheer mass of the stone around him. In a world that was always moving, always changing, this place stood still. It was the anchor of the continent. He lay back on the flat rock. The stone was still warm from the day's sun. It radiated heat into his back, relaxing his spine. He looked up at the sky. The first star appeared, Venus, bright and steady. Leo closed his eyes. He could still see the bands of red rock in his mind, layer upon layer, piece upon piece. He imagined the river far below, the Colorado River, carving its way through the stone. It was invisible from here, just a tiny green thread in the dark, but he knew it was there. Flowing, always flowing, just like his journey. Rush, flow, rush, flow. The air cooled rapidly. The scent of the pine trees intensified in the twilight. Leo wrapped himself in his blanket. He didn't need a tent. To sleep on the rim of the canyon was to sleep on the edge of eternity. He felt a deep sense of stability. The rock beneath him hadn't moved in 1 billion years. It wasn't going to move tonight. He could trust it. His breathing slowed down, mimicking the slow geological time of the canyon. Inhale. The rock is warm. Exhale. The canyon is deep. The vast emptiness in front of him wasn't scary, it was spacious. It gave his mind room to expand, to let go of the clutter. There was room for everything here, room to just be. The silence of the canyon rose up to meet him. It was a thick, velvet silence. Leo drifted. He was a stone. He was a tree. He was the wind. He was home on his own continent, held by the red hands of the earth. Sleep came as slowly and majestically as the shadows filling the gorge. Layer by layer, the consciousness faded, until there was only the deep red dark. The golden ocean. Leo left the red stone giants of the west behind. The journey east was a slow flattening of the world. The jagged peaks of the Rockies smoothed out into rolling foothills, and the foothills eventually melted away entirely, leaving only the horizon. He was in the Great Plains, the breadbasket, the heart of the continent. He sat in the passenger seat of an old, dusty pickup truck. The dashboard was sun-cracked, and the radio played a low, static-filled country song that sounded like it was coming from a memory. The driver, a farmer with hands the size of baseball mitts, didn't say much. He just drove, one hand resting easy on the top of the steering wheel. The road was a straight gray ribbon stretching out to infinity. There were no turns, no hills, just the hypnotic forward motion. Hum-mum-mum. The tires sang on the hot asphalt. It was a steady, high-pitched drone that blended with the wind rushing through the open window. Leo looked out at the landscape. It was an ocean, but not of water. It was an ocean of grain, wheat, corn, soy, miles and miles of it. The wind here was gentle and playful. It ran its invisible fingers through the tops of the wheat stalks, creating ripples that traveled across the fields for miles. Swish, S-H-H-H, swish, S-H-H-H. It looked exactly like the waves of the Atlantic, but slower, softer. The colors were warmer. Instead of blue and gray, the world was painted in amber, gold, and deep, lush green. The sun hung heavy in the sky. It was late afternoon, the time photographers call the golden hour. But here, on the plains, the golden hour seemed to last forever. The light was thick and syrupy. It caught the dust motes dancing in the air, turning them into floating specks of gold. It made the red barns glow as if they were lit from within. Leo rested his arm on the open window frame. The air that rushed over his skin was warm and smelled of sweet hay, dried earth, and ripening crops. It was a smell Leo knew. It was the smell of his childhood. It was the smell of Ohio, drifting west to greet him. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the passing telephone poles. Whoosh, pole, whoosh, pole, whoosh, pole. It was a metronome counting down the miles to home. The truck slowed down as they passed through a small town. A main street, a water tower, a diner, a church. It was quiet. A dog slept on a porch. A flag hung limp on a pole. It was a scene of perfect, suspended animation. Then they were back in the open fields. As evening approached, the sky transformed. In the mountains, sunsets are dramatic and jagged, cut by peaks. Here, the sunset was a 360-degree event. The entire dome of the sky turned a soft, pastel pink, then a deep lavender. The horizon glowed with a band of orange fire that slowly faded into the blue of the night. The driver pulled the truck over onto a gravel shoulder near the edge of a massive cornfield. "Rest here a bit," he mumbled. Leo stepped out. The gravel crunched softly under his boots. The engine ticked as it cooled down. Tick, tick, tick. But then another sound took over, the crickets. It started as a single chirp, then another, until the entire field was singing. Chirp, 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 chirp. It was a rhythmic, pulsing wall of sound. To some, it might be noise. To Leo, it was the ultimate lullaby. It was the sound of summer nights in America. It was the sound of safety. He walked to the edge of the field. The corn stalks stood tall, 7 feet high, creating a wall of green, rustling leaves. The wind whispered through them. Rustle, crackle, rustle. It was a dry, papery sound, comforting and familiar. Leo sat down on the grassy verge. The ground was warm, holding the heat of the long summer day. He watched the fireflies begin to appear, tiny green lights blinking on and off in the darkness of the corn. Blink. Darkness. Blink. Darkness. They were like silent stars floating just above the ground. He felt a deep sense of peace. He wasn't discovering new worlds anymore. He wasn't fighting the cold of the Himalayas or the heat of the Sahara. He was just being. The familiarity of the landscape soothed him. He knew this land. He knew these sounds. He leaned back, lying in the tall grass. It was soft and dry. The sky above was vast. The stars here were not as aggressive as in the desert. They were softer, veiled by the humidity of the summer air. He traced the line of the Milky Way. It looked like a bridge connecting the west he had left to the east he was returning to. The rhythm of the crickets synchronized with his heartbeat. Chirp, beat, chirp, beat. It was a steady, unshakable pulse. Leo felt his eyelids getting heavy. The golden ocean of grain was sleeping, and the land invited him to join. He thought about his bed at home. He was close now, just a few more states, just a few more rides. But for tonight, this field was his home. This sky was his roof. The earth felt solid and kind beneath his back. The smell of the corn was sweet in his nose. Leo drifted. The truck, the road, the field, it all blurred into a warm, golden haze. He was a part of the plains now. Flat, calm, resting. The crickets sang him down deeper and deeper into the warm American night. The familiar street. The final ride ended quietly. The truck driver dropped Leo off at the same highway ramp where he had stood a year ago. The sun was just beginning to rise, exactly as it had on the day he left. The light was a pale, watery gray, slowly turning into the soft gold of an Ohio morning. Leo stood on the asphalt. He looked at his boots. They were different boots now, scuffed, stained with the red dust of the outback, the gray mud of Asia, and the white salt of the sea. But the pavement beneath them was the same. He adjusted the strap of his backpack. It felt lighter now, or maybe he had just grown stronger. He began to walk toward the town. It was a strange sensation. For months, every step he took had been into the unknown. Every corner he turned revealed something he had never seen before, a new mountain, a strange temple, a different ocean. But now, with every step, he was walking into memory. He passed the old gas station with the flickering neon sign. Buzz, click, buzz. He passed the park with the rusted swing set. He turned onto Elm Street. The trees here were old maples. Their branches met overhead, creating a tunnel of green leaves that filtered the morning light. It was a familiar tunnel. Leo knew the cracks in the sidewalk. He knew which paving stone was loose and would make a clack sound if he stepped on it. He stepped on it. Clack. The sound echoed in the quiet morning. It was a greeting. The houses on the street were still sleeping. Curtains were drawn. Cars sat in driveways covered in a fine layer of morning dew. It was a world of absolute stillness. Leo walked slowly. He wasn't in a hurry to finish. He wanted to savor this feeling of re-entry. He breathed in the air. It didn't smell like jasmine or spices or sea salt. It smelled of cut grass, damp concrete, and old wood. It was a plain smell, a simple smell. It was the smell of home. He reached his house. It looked smaller than he remembered. When you see the Himalayas, a suburban roof looks tiny. When you see the endless Pacific, a front lawn looks like a postage stamp. But it also looked safe. It was a sturdy box that had stood against the weather for decades. Leo walked up the driveway. He walked up the wooden steps of the porch. Creak, creak. He reached into the hidden pocket of his backpack and pulled out a key. It was brass, tarnished by time and travel. He hadn't used a key in a year. He had slept in barns, in hammocks, on beaches. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy thunk. He opened the door and stepped inside. The silence of the house was different from the silence of the canyon or the cave. This was a human silence, a waiting silence. The air inside was still and cool. It smelled of lemon polish and old carpet. Leo walked through the living room. Everything was exactly where he had left it. The clock on the wall was ticking. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It had been counting the seconds while he was walking around the world. He walked down the hallway to his room. He opened the door. There was his bed, a simple mattress, a wooden frame. There was his desk. There was the window looking out over the backyard. Leo took off his backpack. He set it down on the floor. It landed with a heavy thump. The sound signaled the end of the motion. The momentum that had carried him for thousands of miles finally stopped. He stood in the center of the room. He felt a strange vibration in his legs, the phantom motion of trains, ships, and buses. But slowly, as he stood there, the vibration faded. The floor held him. The house held him. He walked to the wall where he used to keep a map of the world. It was still there, pristine and unmarked. He smiled. He didn't need the map anymore. The map was inside him now. He could close his eyes and see the curve of the dunes, the blue of the ice, the green of the jungle. He carried the world in his chest. He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Not just the tiredness of the last leg of the trip, but a deep accumulation of a year's worth of sleeping in strange places. He was ready to stop. He didn't bother to unpack. He took off his boots. He took off his jacket. He pulled back the covers of his own bed. The sheets were cool and clean. He lay down. The mattress felt incredibly soft, molding to his back. The pillow was perfect. He looked up at the ceiling. The same white ceiling he had stared at when he was 17, dreaming of leaving. Now he was 18 and he had returned. The silence of the room wrapped around him. It was a thick domestic peace. No wind howling. No waves crashing. No engines humming. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the beating of his own heart. Thump, 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 thump. Leo closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, the images flashed one last time. The blue ocean, the red desert, the white snow, the golden fields. They spun together, faster and faster, mixing into a single color, the color of peace. He took a deep breath. Inhale, home, exhale, done. His body sank into the mattress. He felt heavy, anchored, solid. The journey was over. The circle was closed. And for the first time in a year, Leo fell asleep without wondering where he would be tomorrow. He was here, and that was enough. The reservoir of calm. Years flowed by, as steady and unstoppable as the currents of the Amazon. Leo was no longer the 18-year-old boy with a backpack and empty pockets. He was a man now, with lines of experience etched lightly around his eyes and hands that had grown strong and rough from work. He lived in a city now, not a huge metropolis, but a busy place with traffic, deadlines, and the constant digital hum of modern life. To an outsider, Leo looked perfectly ordinary. He didn't wear exotic clothes. He didn't brag about the time he crossed the Sahara or slept in a cloud forest. He worked as a carpenter and a gardener, shaping wood and earth with a quiet, deliberate focus. But there was something different about him. In a world that was constantly rushing, Leo never ran. In a world that was loud, Leo was a pocket of silence. People noticed it, even if they couldn't explain it. When a project went wrong on a job site and everyone else was shouting or panicking, Leo would simply stand there, breathing slowly. He didn't get angry. He didn't get stressed. He seemed to be listening to a music that no one else could hear. And he was. Leo had discovered a secret. He realized that he didn't have to be in the Himalayas to feel the peace of the mountains. He had stored the mountains inside him. His memory was a vast library of sensations, a reservoir of calm that he could dip into whenever the world got too loud. When he was stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic on a rainy Tuesday, surrounded by the angry red glare of brake lights and the blaring of horns, Leo didn't clench the steering wheel. Instead, he softened his focus. He looked at the rain sliding down the windshield. Slide, drip, slide. In his mind, he transported himself back to the bamboo bungalow in Southeast Asia. The honking cars became the calls of the jungle birds. The engine noise became the low rumble of the river. The rain was the same rain. He breathed in the smell of the wet car upholstery, but his mind smelled the wet earth of the tropics. While others raged against the delay, Leo sat in his car, floating on a mental river, perfectly at ease. When he was working on a roof in the blazing heat of July, and the sun was hammering down, making the air shimmer, he didn't complain about the heat. He closed his eyes for a second and remembered the Sahara. He remembered how the heat felt like a heavy, golden blanket. He remembered that the heat was just energy. He remembered the silence of the dunes. He swung his hammer with the slow, rhythmic efficiency of a camel walking across the sand. Clang, pause, clang, pause. He paced himself. He drank water with gratitude, remembering how sweet the water tasted after the desert crossing. The heat didn't drain him. It reminded him he was alive. One day, a client came to him, frantic and anxious about a deadline, speaking a mile a minute, vibrating with stress. Leo listened. He stood completely still, like the great red rocks of the Grand Canyon. He looked at the client with a calm, steady gaze. He didn't absorb their chaos. He let their words wash over him like the wind in Patagonia. Whoosh! The wind blows, but the mountain doesn't move. Leo spoke quietly, his voice low and resonant. "We will get it done," he said. "One step at a time." His calm was contagious. The client stopped pacing. Their breathing slowed down to match Leo's. Without knowing why, they felt safe standing near him. They felt grounded. This was Leo's superpower. He carried the horizon in his eyes. When he walked down a crowded sidewalk, he walked with the Sherpa step, that slow, energy-saving rhythm he had learned on the way to Everest. Step, breathe, step, breathe. He didn't weave or dodge. He flowed through the crowd like water flowing around stones in a stream. He found that the world was full of portals back to his journey. The sound of a heavy washing machine was the engine of the cargo ship crossing the Atlantic. The steam rising from a cup of tea was the mist of the cloud forest. The silence of a library was the silence of the crystal cave. He realized that the peace he had traveled 20,000 miles to find was not a place. It was a frequency. And once he had tuned his mind to that frequency, he could find it anywhere. Evenings were his favorite time. He would sit on his small back porch. It wasn't an exotic island, it was just a porch in the suburbs. But Leo would sit in his wooden chair, looking at the single tree in his yard. He watched the leaves move. It was the same wind. The wind that had pushed the ship, the wind that had sculpted the dunes, the wind that had whispered in the palm trees. It was visiting him here in his own backyard. He didn't need to leave anymore. He understood now that the external journey was just a way to build the internal map. Now that the map was complete, he could travel without moving an inch. He sat there, a cup of coffee in his hand, feeling the rotation of the earth. He was the captain of his own ship, sailing through the ocean of everyday life. Steady, calm, unshakable. The noise of the city drifted over the fences, sirens, dogs, cars, but to Leo, it was just the white noise of the planet. It was the background hum of existence. He closed his eyes and smiled. He was in the garden, but he was also everywhere he had ever been. The reservoir was full, and the waters were still. The map of dreams. And now, many years later, the night has come again. Leo lies in his bed. The room is dark, lit only by a sliver of moonlight pushing through the curtains. The house is silent. The street outside is silent. The city is winding down, its millions of lights winking out one by one. Leo is an old man now. His hair is the color of the white snow on the Himalayan peaks. His skin is etched with the lines of 1,000 smiles and 1,000 miles. His body is tired, but it is a good tiredness. It is the heaviness of a life well lived, a vessel that has carried much and is now resting in the harbor. He adjusts the pillow under his head. The linens are soft, smelling of lavender and clean air. The blanket is pulled up to his chin, warm and secure. He closes his eyes. He does not need to go anywhere anymore. The world is no longer out there, across the oceans. The world is in here, behind his closed eyelids. Before he drifts off, he performs his nightly ritual. He travels the map one last time, not with his feet, but with his breath. He takes a deep, slow breath in. Inhale. In the quiet of his mind, he hears the Atlantic Ocean. He hears the deep, rolling bass of the waves hitting the hull of the steel ship. Thrum, thrum. The rhythm of the water becomes the rhythm of his blood. He breathes out. Exhale. He feels the warm, dry wind of the Sahara. The golden sand is cooling down under the stars. The silence of the dunes wraps around his thoughts, quieting them, smoothing them out. He breathes in. He smells the rain in the cloud forest. The mist is rising, soft and white, hiding everything. The ancient stones hold him up. The moss is soft beneath him. He breathes out. He feels the weight of the red rocks in the canyon. Solid, immovable, eternal. He is grounded. He is heavy. He is safe. Leo lets his awareness expand. He realizes that he is not sleeping alone. Across the world, the sun has set. The birds in the jungle have tucked their heads under their wings. The camels in the desert are kneeling in the sand. The fish in the crystal caves are hovering in the dark water. The wheat in the Great Plains is standing still in the moonlight. Everything is resting. The earth itself is just a small boat floating in the vast, starry ocean of space. Leo feels the gentle rotation of the planet. It is rocking him. It is rocking you. Rocking, rocking. The memories begin to blur. They lose their sharp edges. The blue of the ocean mixes with the green of the forest and the gold of the desert. They swirl together into a warm, dark haze. There is no more distance. There is no more time. There is only this moment, this bed, this breath. Leo's hands relax. The map slips from his fingers. The journey is complete. The door is closed. The light is out. He sinks down through the mattress, down through the floor, down into the deep, warm earth. Drifting, floating, sleeping. Good night, Leo. Good night, traveler. Good night, world.